Lemon Amiga presents a play-side video review. Sit back and enjoy the show.
Hi, welcome to another Lemon Amiga game guide and review. This time we'll be taking a look at Formula 1 simulator, MicroProse Formula 1 Grand Prix, released Christmas 1991, and programmed by Jeff Crammond, who went from coding Revs on the BBC in 1984 through the Sentinel to Stunt Car Racer in 1989. F1GP was 92 officially released, and then other sequels followed after that. He designed and coded the game. The other designer was Steve Bamborough, who went on to do Fields of Glory. The other coder was Pete Cook, who started with the Tau series on 64 and the Amiga, and the incredible Tower of Babel in 1990 before Formula 1 Grand Prix. Additional graphics by Mike Scott, who had just wrapped on F-15 Strike Eagle 2 in early 91 before F1GP, and went on to help do the graphics for the Civilization games on the Amiga. And the music you can hear at the moment was by Dave Lowe, the same Dave Lowe that did the Frontier Elite 2 music that we covered earlier on. And so let's dive on into the Amiga 500 experience with Formula 1 Grand Prix. And we'll cut out the loading times from the floppy, but this game came on 4 floppy disks when released, which is still incredible. And we can choose our language to begin with before entering the password to unlock the game, and this is a subsequent crack, so let's just skip past that. And then the player gets to choose to have a quick race at Silverstone against the computer, or to access the main menu, and from here we get to choose the track and edit the features of the game. So first of all, let's have a look at this driver selection, and in here we can change the drivers' names and also the team name should we choose to do so. So let's have a look at Williams first of all. This is the 1991 season, so you'll find Nigel Mansell, Red 5, and Riccardo Patrese. Let's deselect Nigel for this experience and look into the McLaren, where we should find there he is, Ayrton Senna at number 1. So let's select him and then return to the main menu, and I think I'm just going to turn on fast windows at this point, because even on the Amiga 500 switching on the fast windows in the settings does make a difference. And then let's have a quick play, a quick race at Silverstone. So if we'd just like to go to a non-championship race in this instance, so we can select the tracks. You get to select all the 16 tracks which were played in the 1991 season in any order you like, and Silverstone is pretty faithful to how it was way back when. They've since changed it incredibly, but here we go. This is the Formula 1 experience. We can jump in there straight away. We don't have to practice or qualify. Unfortunately, we'll qualify at the back of the entire grid if we decide to do that, and that's what we are doing. But this is the Amiga 500 experience of F1GP, and you can see all the graphics are laid out in vectors, so there's a lot of heavy maths going on in the background. There are no sprites in this game, so just like Stunt Car Racer, the vectors have been used to flash out a 3D world, and they really have done a superb job on this, recreating these many tracks in full 3D. You might notice the detail there is set on full detail, and because this is the Amiga 500 8 frames per second setup, this is rather on the jerky side, as you can see. With the details switched on high, maybe you can appreciate the tremendous complexity of this game. Every car is an individually computer controlled player, each with its own levels of intelligence, Some will stick to the racing line, others will veer off it, some will cut corners, others won't, some will spin off and create hazards which you must avoid, observing the trackside marshals waving their yellow flags. And yes, these are accurately represented in this game. All the Formula 1 rules are there, and there's also the elements of destructibility in the game. All the aspects of the cars and their tyres and their bodies can degrade at various levels, and all these real world physics will determine whether you stay on that track or whether you just spin off into the barriers. Once your car damage reaches a critical level, you'll find your engine cuts and your gears fail, and individual components can fail indeed in this game, but once you reach that critical level, that's it, it's game over, and you might as well be pushed by a marshal there off the track. So yes, the graphics are primitive in this game, but that more than makes up for the underlying aspects, the deep mechanics which affect the game. And yes, you can turn on indestructibility if you like, and self-righting spins, and a variety of other options such as suggested gear, and the racing line highlighted on the screen as a heads-up display. So the game really does cater for a variety of drivers, from the novice to the pro, and there's even an ace mode which no longer provides access to those driving aids and means you have to be a perfecto driver to do these courses. So let's take another look at the game. Let's go into the practice option, which means we can practice any track without any opponents in our way. And the pit box offers the option of changing tyres. We'll select the D tyres for this trip, and you can't select the qualifiers unfortunately in this mode. This is just basically a lap time warm-up practice mode, and straight away you can see when the screen gets incredibly busy, the frame rate dips into minimal, and with 8 frames per second on the 500, this is what we were used to back in the day. But by switching that off, by pressing the Alt and D keys together, we can switch on and off the background detail by a number of steps, and that certainly speeds up the game and the frame rate on the 500 so that it's acceptable. It doesn't make it any easier to drive around the track, that's up to you, but it does mean it's at least a bit more playable. And so the easiest way to get around that is to hack the game. This is the F1GP patch, the latest version and the last version to be released, and through this we can basically tailor the game to our heart's desire, everything from the car dynamics to the game mechanics to the position of the game on screen there. I can switch on a heads-up display which will show me the laps as they tick down, and a number of other settings as well. We can turn on the in-game keys, where you can press keys 1 to 6 to change the frame rate, and other factors. Well, we can change the speed factors, we can change the lap records, we can change the game graphics and sounds, we can change the saving of statistics that the game can memorize for us and save our split times to disk. But one of the most important options for me is to increase the frame rate from 8 frames per second all the way up, and we can choose 16 frames per second if we want to play in a championship race, or 25 frames per second there if we want to just use the practice mode. Unfortunately, you cannot use 25 frames per second in a championship race, the game just won't allow it, but at least we get to see the 25 frames in practice mode. And before that, let's just have a look at the other options. We can change the times, the lengths of periods of races, and the mode. In rookie mode you get to choose all the options, all the helps, all the aids, and by the time you get to ace you don't. And you might notice the hack has also updated the driver's statistics to 2002, so we find David Coulthard there driving for McLaren, and so let's select him. You can select any number of players you like for a multiplayer contest. The players will take their turn driving around a track for a number of laps. So the game is certainly generous in its multiplayer options, although I'm not sure whether you could link computers together. You could certainly save a game mid-race and load that up for a multiplayer challenge. And the game is even flexible in its setup options there. The amateurs can take advantage of the auto brakes and the auto gears. I'd particularly suggest auto gears. You can have the computer self-right those spins if you like. You can even turn the damage off if you like, which I'd certainly recommend for the amateur, as well as switching on the ideal line so you can follow that around the track, and also the suggested gear will tell you which gear you need for the next corner. And now we're happy with those, let's have another non-championship race. And the game will even memorise certain statistics within itself, which you can view by clicking on the info button. And of course you can edit those times with the F1GP editor, as well as altering those times with your own high scores. To make the game even more interesting, the programmers have even thoughtfully coded in random wet races and the ability to change your car setup, such as front and rear wings, the brake balance and the tyre compound. And even though these things are trivial compared to today's multi-customised racers, and you can even change the gear ratios there, it was still a good step in the right direction for car customability when games like Stunt Car Racer were around at the same time, which didn't offer any of these options. In fact, this game really took the F1 genre way into the future in 1991, and even the 3D graphics. 3D was a unique feature. The first Doom clones hadn't even arrived in 1991, so being able to drive at high speed around a 3D environment had only been done basically in Indy 500, and that was basically the pioneer which led the whole way. And Indy 500 was released the year before this, in 1990. This was released in Christmas 91, and oh, look at that big crash there. The 25 frames per second on the old 30 really does make a difference to these frame rates, and unfortunately it doesn't make a difference to the other players' intelligence, which range from really intelligent players to the ones that will just stick like glue to the racing line, and if you happen to touch those things, they will bump into you and knock you off the track, and sometimes there's no way around that. And so let's thread our way through a few laps of this course. Look at that, the other opponent player, if you get in front of those guys, there is just no mercy. It's usually you rather than them, and as I said, the level of grip they find is unbelievable compared to you on some of these tracks. So precision driving. On the upside, your driving seems to be way above their average speeds, so as long as you can get through the bulk of the traffic on the first few laps, you should be able to maintain a healthy lead in championship mode. The problem really is getting past those guys in the first place, as you can see. But once again, AI was still in its infancy in these days, so to have AI in any capacity has to be a plus point in a game such as this. A pioneer, a breakthrough in every respect, and you can even see the crowd there in the stands. It's just a pity that now we're on 16 frames per second. To appreciate the smoothness and the speed of this game, it takes something like an old 30 processor and a hacked version of the executable to really get to appreciate this game for what it is. And it's certainly a pity I never got to appreciate that in '92 when I had this game, the A500, and it's only now that I can really see what this game was all about and the potential it had, which was explored later on the PC version, which was simply known as Grand Prix. And I just love the complexity and the detail, particularly the damage and the fact that you can go into the pits and not only repair front and rear wings, but also obviously change your tyres as well. The pits in this game seem to last for a tremendously long time. You can see there you can accelerate time in the pit lane. I don't know quite how a 7 to 10 second pit stop can feel like 10 minutes when you sat there waiting for this game, but apart from that, the timings seem to be spot on. Even the lap time seems to be pretty accurate to the actual tracks, and having a look at those tracks, the detail is more or less there. Some tracks have changed since this game was made, and some corners aren't absolutely perfect, but in general you can certainly get a feel for those tracks with the detail on. Especially there you can see the trees here at Hockenheim, and this all adds to the sheer scope of the technical achievement the programmers pulled off when they released this. With the fast processor, the handling of the cars are smooth and realistic, and you can even spin out the back and skid in this game and do all kinds of tricks like that. The mechanics of velocity in this vector game are accurately represented, and inertia too. If you decide to turn at the wrong moment and you generate slip angle on those tyres, you will be going off. Wow, look at that. There's realistic game physics at every opportunity, and this game doesn't shy away from presenting you with those, usually right in your face. So when dealing with other drivers, caution is definitely advised, otherwise it'll be a quick trip to the wall, and nobody likes that, particularly when it's a long journey back to the pits. You can press Q at any point to return to the pits, or you can drive around the track, and the realistic game physics there making it hard work for me to get there because my nose and my rear wing have been smashed to bits. The two yellow lights in the bottom right corner indicate I must go to the pits, but look at that, I've just missed the pit entrance. By the time I've slowed down to a stop, I'm quite a way back from the pit entrance, so these futile attempts to do it in reverse aren't going to work, so never do that. But yeah, this game was ahead of its time in all kinds of respects, so let's just compare the versions. Christmas 91 there for Grand Prix 1, and Grand Prix 2 followed quite some years afterwards, but as you can see the PC has certainly taken those graphics onto a higher level, and by the time we get to Grand Prix 3 there in 2000, that 10-year gap means that 3D is revolutionised, and there wasn't much of improvement in 3D by the time you get to 2002's Grand Prix 4, but you can tell the processor power has allowed for more background graphics and more detail there, higher screen resolutions and faster frame rates, and it makes the 8 frames per second 1991 effort look like a dinosaur. But here we go, this is a full lap of Japan played on all 4 setups on all 4 games, and Suzuka has changed slightly in all 4 games, so that's why I had to give Grand Prix 1 and 2 a lead over the others, not least because the modern Grand Prix cars travel much more quickly than they did in the 90s, and you can see the texture graphics have certainly changed over the decades, and the resolutions as well, and the processing power has certainly meant better accuracy. And looking at the 2002 game, you might be forgiven for thinking that that matches the latest games, the 2010, 2011, 2012 is about to be released. They haven't really improved it in the last 10 years, but back in the day there were a sheer number of improvements going on. So that's the laps completed, and let's start to fade those out. Grand Prix 4 has finished, and followed by Grand Prix 1 and Grand Prix 2 and 3. So that's a good look at all 4 games in the series, and now it's time for the gallery. Let's take a look at each track individually in a track-by-track guide, this time running at 25 frames per second on an all 60 setup. That should mean the game runs as fast and as smooth as it's ever going to get. The detail level is on high, the tyres are on D, all the setups are default, including the wings, the balances and the gear ratios. In fact, I'm playing this with automatic gears. And let's take a look at the in-game screen. First of all, you can see the driving wheel, the revs running up and down in the centre of the screen. Below the rev counter there, you can see the first box is ghosted out. That's actually to represent the automatic brakes, which are pretty useless in this game, even for amateurs, so it's best to switch those off. And it's actually ghosted because we're using rookie mode instead of novice, so that option isn't available. The higher you go in the settings, the less those aids will be available to you. The next one along represents the automatic gears. The next one, the arrow there, means self-righting spins are on, so if I spin out they will be corrected. And the last three lights, indestructibility is off, the racing line is off, and the suggested gears are off. This is us completing our out lap and starting a new lap at Pheonix, which is the first of the 16 tracks we'll cover. It's a nice easy roll out over the line till you get to that point. I like to observe the roadside obstacles there to judge my braking point, and for that corner you really want to be in second gear, averaging around 85 miles per hour. You can change the miles per hour to kilometers in the settings, and the times you can see there, 70 miles per hour. That is an average time. Sometimes you'll be able to go over that, particularly if you have Q tyres and different setups you might be able to go over, but certainly if you're much under those recommended times you'll find it difficult. Drag the car all the way across there into the corner and accelerate all the way over, and sometimes there are special tricks that you learn on each track, but the braking points in particular are the most difficult aspects to learn. Once that's in the bag it's pretty easy, but the next corner is a crazy high speed corner which requires accurate timing there with that roadside marker. When you see that blue line appear there on the edge, drive straight for that, directly at it at 6th gear, and then when you're just about to see the white line appear in the bend, turn in as high a gear as you can and hope you don't touch the sides. You can do both of those in 6th gear. It's just a matter of aiming directly for the bend, and then braking point again, picking those braking points. 2nd gear if you can maintain that. If you can't, you'll just have to rev the engine so that you can get somewhere around about the 80 for this, and then close it down to 70 for this. You can see I geared down by mistake, so over the margin there for error, I'm using auto gears, so sometimes it does that, and it really is important to hit the right gears for the right turns, and the last few turns can all be done at 80. So 2nd gear definitely recommended for this. If you're still in 1st by now you are wasting time. You can slip it up to 90 before this corner, and then the rest of it is basically flat out all the way up to the line. So this is one of my competition scoring runs. Let's see what I managed to get. And that's a 120.5 with the default setup and the D tyres, and Amiga managed to do it in a 117.2. So certainly a lot of places on that particular track where I could have been much faster. Let's take a look at Brazil now, and unlike Phoenix, Arizona, Brazil is a much easier track to drive. Whereas Phoenix had a lot of 90-degree bends that required hair-raising tactics, this is a very flowing course that requires accuracy and speed and timing, but it's a much easier track to drive in my mind because of its banked nature, and the fact that the roads are cambered means you can really throw those things down the hills and into the bends. So let's just take a brief tour of the track before we try and go for a competition run. And there are quite a number of high speed bends, but in the second section of the track, the middle section, there are 2 very low speed bends. One of those is a 1st gear corner, the other one is a 2nd gear corner, and it all depends on your speed entering those as to entering this 3rd section, which is actually the fastest section. Basically there's a 2nd gear corner here, and then after that it's a full speed layout all the way up to the line, so even amateurs should have no problem with that. So watching our slip angle over the rise, the first big decision is in fact the 1st corner, and watching those trackside markers we can see to get all the way over to the right, throw it down into 2nd gear and try and get as close to 95 as possible. As soon as you hit that target, look for the line in the road, that white marker there. You can drive straight for that whilst accelerating straight for it, and what you really need to aim for is to get into the 6th gear just at this point, just before that thing disappears off screen, and if you do that then you're on time for a good lap. and watch the braking point there. As soon as you see that just about to disappear, that 100 board, you can get that into second and aim for around 100. If you ease off there down to the 90s, you can get around it easier, or if you slow down earlier through the bend, you can usually exit it quicker. This is a difficult bend. Observe the braking point there and that little bit of a marker. It's a 4th gear and it has to put at higher speed, 140 there, which is spot on for that corner. You can accelerate through the rest of it, but as soon as you see that arrow leave the centre of the screen, it's time to slam on down, back to 2nd gear, and try and negotiate this bend. And I actually lost 0.2 of a second, so let's rewind that and see that again. The arrow leaves the centre of the screen, the gears go down into 2nd gear, but the revs are just too low, and the automatic gearbox puts me down into 1st and scrubs off all that time I needed for this 80-mile-an-hour corner. By the time I get back up there and get back into 2nd, I haven't lost too much time. It's not like I've thrown away an entire Grand Prix, but unfortunately that lost me 0.2 of a second, which in a championship competition is a lot of time indeed. The next corner could be equally tricky, and the sign, the arrow there, should be round about the same position on the screen as the previous one, i.e. just off centre. And for this one, it really needs a 1st gear, 50 miles per hour, and as soon as you get there, real advantage of going across to the other side of the track is you can get the power hammered down, full acceleration all the way to the last big decision on this track, and that's this 2nd gear corner. And under normal circumstances, what the player has to do is wait for that tower to just about to be moving off the screen, brake at that point, throw it into the corner in 2nd gear. Anywhere around 85 miles per hour up to probably 90 is easy enough to do that bend. Anything over 90 is a bit too quick, but I've certainly managed to get it floating around that kind of mark. But what I actually did on this lap was I waited too long for the actual roadside marker to disappear. There's where I should have broke, and here's where I actually broke. So a little difference of opinion there, but what that meant, just a little carryover as I go around the corner. That means just a little extra inertia as I get through to the middle of the corner, which throws me onto the grass. It's only 1/10 of a second, and that flew by in less than an instant. But what that meant basically was I was less than full momentum, got across the line, and my result was a 1:10.1. And in this case I was beaten by John, who got a 1:09.8, just 0.2 difference. So on to the next track. Here's Marino. It's San Marino. It's the one we all love to hate, going around the famous Tamburello there. No prizes for guessing why I don't like that bend. We'll just have a quick speed lap through this course, just so we can check that out before we examine all the different bends. And if you didn't know already, I really do like the playability, the feel of the style and the handling of this game, played on the 25 frames per second ideal setup of the old 60. It really makes this game stand out, and even though we won't get time to conclude my earlier review, I'll conclude it right now by saying I really appreciate what the coders did. I think they took the driving experience to a whole new level, certainly beyond the Outrun model that we experienced in the 80s, and this paved the way to all the 3D games that we've got now. In fact, we can't have a game now without it being 3D. So this really did set a lot of standards, and the accuracy and the detail, the driving model, the destructibility, it was all brand new in the day. So hats off to the programmers, and I think they did an amazing job. But to get a terrific lap on this course, what you really have to do is cut the final bends. So this is what the lap looks like ordinarily. We travel over the line there at around about 160 miles per hour, but as I say, by the time we go around again, we really want to be cutting that. And this is what my actual cut looked like on that session. I lost 1 whole second on that cut. So let's see it again. How do you do it? Well, aim directly for that corner, and that lines us perfectly up for the cut. All we have to do is keep the thing pointing straight forward, pull the stick to the right halfway along the cut, and that should get us over the line. I'll show you a perfect cut after this, but that's a 1 second lost cut we actually went over the line there at 175, so it's still worth doing the cut even though I cocked it up. And so we get to the first major slow point, and it's a second gear corner under normal circumstances, but I slip it into first and it looks like I've missed my braking point as well, which means I'm having to recover. Ideally this is a 70 miles per hour corner, accelerating on the exit, but no, lost half a second there, so I've lost a second and a half on the leaders with those mistakes. But continuing, what you really have to do is to hit the next corner at 125 in third or fourth gear ideally, but once again I'm having trouble with those gears, and then we plunge downhill to a very tight hairpin at the bottom of this thing. So let's just cut it to show you that you don't need to do that. The entrance to this point is 100, and you can see me floating above there trying to get a good exit. You can get a really good exit off there, you can make up time on that particular cut. And if you like cutting, there's another cutting opportunity here. All the player has to do again, aim directly for that corner, and you can see the joystick positions there. You hold it to the left and then to the right in fifth gear and simply breeze straight over the gap. So plunge down into sixth gear. Look at this, I'm off the circuit again. That's another 1 second lost over the leaders. What happened then? I simply followed the momentum down. It's really straight off the ideal line there, and the momentum just threw me into the grass. Well, that's probably 2.5 seconds now down on the leaders, but let's see what we can make of the rest of this lap. It's around about an 80 there, and if you're good you can get it into third gear and hit the next bend 115 or faster. I've certainly had that much faster than the 90 I'm crawling around there at the moment. So that could be an unknown length of time. Let's just see that again. You aim straight for the corner as per usual, and in third gear there 116 I was hitting at that point. Unfortunately I hit slip angle and I slipped out of that bend, but you can certainly see the potential of that bend compared to what I got, and then straight over the grass there for the perfect cut on the exit, which gives me a 114.0. It's certainly not a 111.6 scored by a lines machine, but that was the best I managed to video on the day. The next track, Monaco. No introduction needed for this track, so let's just get straight onto the gears. In for the second part of the Rascast bend in first gear and get it around there, but splash on a little speed to get into second before the Ted Nugent corner. And if you can only do that in first, then you've basically lost that second, lost all that exit speed. I'll maintain that all the way to the line. Very tricky braking point here, so throw it in third gear at around 100 miles an hour. Should usually do it. I actually touched the wall there, which knocked me down, but that's how you lose 2/10 on that. You really need to get around all these bends clean at Monaco for obvious reasons. Either third or fourth gear here, around about 107 to about 110, and crawling around there at less than 100, so I lost some speed on that. And 80 in third gear while I was in second, so lost a little speed on that, and slam on there for this one, heading down towards Lowes. It's definitely a first gear. Be careful not to touch the sides because they do appear rather quickly. And nicely around there, down again for Lowes. You can do this in second if you're very careful, but I overshot the braking point, as you can see. So this is yet another example of what not to do. And going down towards the harbour, it's another second gear corner ideally, so you can get anything from 80 to 90 exiting this point. Crawling around here at 65 isn't my idea of heaven, and you really have to get on those gears early. And through the tunnel, probably the easiest section of any track, and just as that thing goes off screen, the 100-metre barrier, you can slam on down to a 70 mile an hour second gear, and that speed has to be really maintained. You can enter this bend in second, but you must exit it in first because it's such a tight exit. And you can see I clipped the side there even though I am in first. That lost me at least a second on that shimmy. And all these next bends can be done at third gear, around about 100 miles per hour for the entire lot. So let's see what I make of it. Still in third gear, lost a little bit of speed there. Back up to third gear, over 100, making up time there. Back down to third gear, 90 or above, somewhere around 90, you can get away with it. Second, should be in third, and it's another plunging onto the brakes again for Lorascas. Onto the first gear, again steer for the second part of that corner, and then back to the Ted Nugis corner, second, which I failed to do again, and that looks like another terrible time for me, probably 4 seconds off the leaders. So I did that in a 1:20.6, and the leader managed to get around there in a 1:17.4. That was Akabe again, the cut master. So on to the next track. It's Canada, and at the end of this 6th gear snake we will find a very tricky final complex of corners. You have to get it in there in 5th gear and avoid the wall of champions. But for me, I find the next corner particularly tricky. You have to brake halfway across the corner, it feels like, while the bend is still turning from the previous one, and I missed the braking point. You saw that disappearing away there. Unfortunately, that is a 2nd gear corner, and you can get much more speed out of that exit than I did, and it's so easy to miss the exit point. And just drop down into 5th there, just ease it down into 155 miles per hour, just make sure you get around that, and then slam on again all the way down to 2nd. Try and hit that 80 or above, 80 to 85 perhaps, and pile on the power all the way out of that bend for another 6th gear straight, and a little breather before we get to another slam on point. It's vitally important to hit the 85 as you enter this corner, and then anything after that is a bonus. You can then pile on the power as you follow the apex out of that bend, or alternatively you could just cut the whole thing, and this is how you do it. Aim for the bridge, hold the joystick left and then hold it right halfway across, and that should be an easy cut in 6th gear, and then cruise on down to another heavy braking 1st gear hairpin there. And judging that turning point is ever critical. It's so easy to go too quickly through this entry point and then end up on the grass, so I like to keep it down to 55. Between 55 and 60 is probably a good speed to aim for, and then once you hit that 60 you can level it out through this section, a very easy 6th gear section, before we go back down to the wall of champions. So let's see what we make of it. So we get to this point, simply gear down into 5th, lean it over to the right there, and then pull it directly left, and you should be able to get through that at virtually full speed. So that's how you do it, and that lap was a 1:12.5 for me, but it certainly wasn't good enough to beat John 4P, who managed to get a 1:11.8. So it's the difference there. On to Mexico for a little different story. This circuit is particularly memorable for its succession of slow curves in the midsection there, and you really have to combine high speed with smoothness to get a fast exit from that section, but that should mean the final corner can be done at full speed. So all you need to do is to wait for the scenery to move, and as soon as you see that dome in the background move, that's your cue to turn the corner. And then another high speed 6th gear section gives the player a breather before we get to another tight section which opens the wiggly midfield that we saw earlier on. So picking our exit point, we're actually going to cut this, lean it over to the right, let it roll out a little way, and then as soon as we see the exit point in front of us, hold it left and then right again, and we should be able to get 5th or 6th gear out of that cut and get our way ahead of the competition. By far the most difficult corner on the entire circuit is this one, which requires players to bend and brake at the same time. So it's 1st gear, 70 miles an hour, weave in, nice and gentle, splash of 2nd, and eventually up to 3rd to make some time before we drop back down again into 1st for this one. 60 miles per hour, do not be tempted to go any faster or you'll be out of line for this corner. Building on the pressure up to 120, building it up again, another 120, and 3rd gear, maintain the revs there. You can see 135 for the next corner, and then pile on the pressure there as soon as you see the blue board in the background. Up to 155, 175, up into 6th gear here, and then again as soon as you see the dome move, you can cruise around that bend from this point. Just follow the road all the way around in top gear, and then hopefully you should be able to cut across the line with a fast time. That's a 107.9, and that was the exact 107.9 which won me that round of the championship. It's good to win one race. So, on to the next course. This is France, and this is a cutter's paradise. So, let's lead on to this track and see what a nightmare it really is. First of all, Magny Cours is a high-speed track requiring high-speed cornering. So, to get through these at high speed, 6th gear, if you slip you'll end up in 5th gear, which is precisely what I've done, but usually it's a fine balancing act in speed is that corner. So rolling out again for another fast section and watching those braking points about there for probably the slowest corner in this track. It's a 45 and you can gain and lose time on this corner. Maintain the revs if you can do to try and maintain that speed, and you will have to slam on here if you don't want to cut into 2nd and then through the level. If you do want to cut, all you need to do is aim for the corner, and as soon as you touch the grass you can do a left and a right with the joystick and cut that in 5th gear. That should leave you in 6th gear for these fast corners before you get down again into 2nd for this one. And observe the corner, observe the braking point, 70 miles per hour. Keep those revs going. The higher the revs, the faster you can accelerate again, and then as soon as the exit appears, back onto the power, and then it's another cutting position appearing here. If you want to do it the normal way, it's a 2nd gear at 80, leading on to a slower section which can potentially be done in 3rd. But if you want to cut that, it's completely possible to cut that section out completely, holding it left onto the grass, holding it right halfway along, the usual cutting formula, and that means you can enter this corner still in 3rd or high 2nd, maintaining that output, maintaining that exit speed, and the exit speed is all important for that section, leading down to the final break here. And it's certainly possible to cut this section as well, but what I like to do is to get down to the 55 early. As soon as I hit that point I can slam it back onto the power and over the line. That wasn't such a miraculous level for me, and it won't be a great time either. That was a 107.5, and John 4P did it in a 106.7, so he won that round. Not too far behind. So on to the next track. This is GB, this is Great Britain. So Silverstone is a real driver's circuit, and that doesn't become much more apparent than on the first corner, which is surprisingly tricky. It's 6th gear, virtually full speed corner, and as long as you pick the entry point perfect, drop just a little bit of speed off, just to knock it down into the 180s, you shouldn't have a problem with that corner. And then full speed ahead until we get to this point, which means we should gear down to at least 4th or possibly even 3rd to get around this corner, unless you want to cut it like I'm doing, which just means simply driving straight across the grass. You should aim to be under 23 seconds before the bridge for a good cut. 23 seconds after the bridge is not very good. That's half a second off the leaders, and so we slow down again. And it's another potential 3rd gear corner unless you want to enter the bend too quickly like I'm doing, to set yourself up for the cut. And this can be done quite easily in 4th. I'm struggling to get anywhere near 4th on this, but I've managed to cut. And then in 2nd gear for this one, 80 miles an hour ordinarily. If you're in 1st, you're losing speed, and so you better get it up there. You can do it in 1st gear, it's entirely possible, but the sooner you get it up there the better. And you can see I geared directly up to 3rd there in an effort to try and get myself further along this track, which moves through a number of high speed corners before we get to the final complex at the end of all this. So 54 seconds, that's not bad, but 53 seconds would have been better at that point. Into 2nd or perhaps even 3rd for this one, but definitely around 90 miles per hour. remain in second for this next one. It's a little bit slower. I like to take it around 70, maintaining the revs as much as possible. Keep it in second, pile on the power, and then slow down again for this next one, around about 100 miles per hour, and pile on the power again. Get it into third, back into second for this one, if possible, around 105 miles per hour. And then it's just a lead out over the line from that point. I scored a 1:17.1, and the leader of this round managed to do it in a 1:16.6. That was John 4P. On to the next track. And this time it's Hockenheim, which starts with a really tricky exit from this leading corner to the line. Second gear, third if possible, and then fifth gear corner. As soon as the scenery changes, just lean it in there, no problem whatsoever, for a long drive out. Now there are two aspects to this course, the uncutting and the cuttable one, and the uncuttable course is significantly slower. For the cuttable one, all you need to do is to lean it over there to the right and drive straight over the gap. It's a sixth gear cuttable corner, and then we line up for the next one. Keep leaning to the right, fairly central on the track. When you see the 100 there, you just get over to that side and then straight forward again with the joystick, sixth gear, 200 miles per hour, straight over that gap. And then after another lead out, we approach the third one of our cuts, which is another centrally placed vehicle straight over that gap. Sometimes you might want to flick that out left or right, but I'm just going to drive straight over it to attain 56 seconds by that point. But what happens if you don't cut it correctly, or if you have a slightly slower cut? Well, this one's slightly slower than the 200 miles an hour, and the next one, well, that's equally slower than 200 miles per hour, so that makes a huge difference. You wouldn't believe the amount of difference that just a few miles per hour makes, but you can definitely see on the faster run with the faster cut, it makes a huge difference. So let's take a moment to return to the faster of our two playthroughs and approach the final bends. Sixth gear, full speed, lean into that corner and then plunge it straight down into second again for this 80. You can see I'm maintaining the revs there. As soon as the bend completes itself, you can pile on the power again all the way up to third if you like for these subsequent corners. Back down to around 110 for this one, second gear, and float it around the 110, 115 if you like. As long as you're around 108 by this point, I think that's the best option that you have for the best speed over the line. And that one was a 1 minute 24.597. So you've now observed footage of that particular winning run. On to the next one. And this to me is a very interesting track. This is Hungary, and it requires very dexterous handling and precise manoeuvres throughout, and it's also very fast and very fun as well. So let's just get around that final bend and roll over the line and check this one out. So the first corner is a tricky one. You have to maintain around 100. I like to get down to around 95 there for the best exit speed for that corner, and then it's another second of gear around 90. If you tend to go over that, you'll go off, and that means it's difficult to line up for the next one. And if you line up correctly, you should be able to accelerate all the way up through the gears, all the way through this bend. As soon as it turns, get in there, back down again, perhaps third, perhaps second again for this one, around 100, 95 if you want to play that safe. And then here's the cutting section. It's a fourth gear cut, lean it in early and get it across that grass. Anything less than fourth gear is not fast time on that cut. So second for this one, around about 85, and I've done this one at 105, maybe even higher than that at some points, but 115 is the exit speed, and I certainly lost some time on that section of corners. Sixth gear all the way down to the final cutting spot, which is another sixth gear, fifth gear drive across. And then this is an important 75, you have to get that down there. It's a real tight corner, and if you don't go and hit that 75 like I didn't, then you're losing time. And then you can roll it in third gear, drop it down to second, let the revs drop until you reach that 90s zone, around about 93, 95, and then it's over the line. I scored 1 minute 10.6, but that wasn't enough to beat Parpila, who did it in a 1 minute 10.1. So hats off to him. The next course is Spa, the legendary Spa at Belgium. And right from the get-go, I'm gonna cut it. So that means we can get somewhere around 200 over the line. And then it's a full-on braking manoeuvre into this first corner. It's first gear 50. I like to do it. If you're going any slower than 50 like this into the 40s, then you're basically losing time, especially if you skid around that corner as well. And then we drop down into a rouge and follow the apex. As soon as that road turns, you turn with it. And you might notice I've actually selected the best dotted line on this course just to show you what that looks like and how easy it is with that best dotted line. It's slightly harder without it, but entirely possible. And what I like to do is to roll it in fourth gear, third gear, let it roll all the way down to second gear quite naturally, and up again for a bit of a spurt, catch on that time. As long as you're around 115 for the exit, you can gain time on that corner. Second gear again, around about 90, 95 perhaps on the run through of this. If you can get it up to 95, that's brilliant. And then you can accelerate again through the gears, just dropping speed just a little bit, just to make sure you don't go on that grass. But roll up through the gears for this next one, and again just a little drop of speed if you're not confident in this corner. Otherwise it's sixth gear. I just lost a little speed through that, and this is another fifth gear. If you end up going down into fourth because of the revs, just pile back on the pressure, try and get it up to that 160 again, and then drop it down again. This is a fourth gear bend, it's a 120, and you can see I completely overcooked that, lost 4/10 of a second. Even though I was on the grass for a split second, for every millisecond you are on the grass you will lose 1/10. So I was probably on there for 4 milliseconds and lost 4/10 as a result. And then the final cut, lead it over to the right, and then hold it right, hold it left halfway across, and that's basically it. One lap of Spa. That's 1 minute 39.2, and yet again that was not enough to beat Parp, who did it in a 1 minute 38.7. And on to the next one. It's track 12. It's Monza in Italy, which happens to be running the same weekend I'm recording this playthrough. So it's a really easy track, it's a really fast track, and it's also very short. So let's just get around the first easy bend and roll out and check this one out. At the end of this straight, the player will find a wiggly section of the track, which can usually be done somewhere around second gear, but if you hold central to the track, the player will just be able to drive straight over that section, maintaining at least fifth, hopefully sixth, to get a good speed into this zone, which is a very tricky, tight corner indeed. The computer recommends you do it in fourth, but I can only do it really in second and gain the speed advantage there. Really fast exit, but if you'd like to cut it, it's entirely possible to do that, and this is an example of me cutting it basically in fifth, going into sixth, and I didn't really lose much speed with that cut. All you need to do is lean across early and you can cut it. That gives you all the speed advantage in the world going into this complex. When you see the 100, dip it into fourth, and what I like to do is again let the engine revs take the speed down naturally into second, and then try and aim for that 90 on exit. A little bit less there, a little bit on the grass, lost those couple of tenths, but certainly made it up with that cut. And then the parabolica can be done in fourth. All you need to do is wait until you see that 100, straight into fourth and steer it across at the same time. Aim for the 140 and maintain the revs, and then you can put on full acceleration all the way up to the line. That was a 1 minute 10.5. And after a few more laps I scored a 1 minute 10.1, which was the time which won that round of the championship. So the next one is Portugal. And at this stage of the championship I received a request to have a wet race, so hacking the game, I made sure Portugal was a wet race so we could all drive around it. So these average times you can see in the bottom left hand corner I'll be showing you are for wet tyres. I'm sure with qualifying tyres these times will be greatly increased, and this isn't a great run to be honest, so let's see what I make of it. 5th gear around that first corner. If you hit the apex you should be able to maintain the 140s, the high 140s, similar again, 145, maybe even 150 with the right tyres, and then a 75 for the next corner, which is really difficult to do. I'm doing it in 72 because of the wet tyres. It's still screeching me around that bend, and you can splash and dash a little bit of power there to get some seconds, but if you pick the wrong line from this one, you can see I usually do that at 70 and I only managed to do that at 40, scrubbing off lots of speed there because of that slide. And then it's a full speed up to this one, 100 metre board, which says it's a 70, 72 ideally, but unfortunately I was in first gear instead of second, so I didn't quite make that. And then it's on the brakes again for another second, a very tight bend. You can usually roll in there, enter it in third gear, but you have to be on that second 75 I'm using as a reference for these tyres, perhaps even 80 if you have Q tyres, and all the speed you like running up this hill as long as it's less than 115. I've used 105 there as a wet tyre marker, and splash and dash through this section as long as you're in second gear here, rolling out through the 80s or the late 70s, you should be fine. Anything above that you'll be on the grass, and then it's a tight turn. You have to put as much power on as you can without slipping, and then it's a jog over the line. So let's see what that turned out to be. A 1, 2, 3, 4, and Akabi did it in a 1, 2, 1, 6. So I hope I've gone somewhere to show you the mistakes I made on that track, and maybe Spain will be a bit of an improvement for me. Let's have a look. Nice easy first couple of turns there, rolling out the start finish line, and then the first corner can actually be cut in 5th gear if you like, or if you want to do it legitimately you'll have to find second. The entry speed is 85. As soon as you hit that 85 you can slam on the accelerator and get through that apex, but if you're doing it the cutting way, all you have to do is roll it into the bend, hold it right, left and then right again, the usual cutting technique, and you should end up in 5th going into this section, at least 5th or 6th. Repsol can be done in second gear, around about 100 miles an hour or slightly over if you can get away with that. 105, you can pile on the exit speed as much as possible, and then Seat corner, another first gear corner around 75 or 80 if it's all possible, and then floor it all the way around that corner. Quick change down into third for this one, try and get it around 115, avoiding those curbs, and piling the power again up to 5th, not much more than 5th, or otherwise you'll jump on that curb and spin off. And then if you want to cut, it can be done in 5th gear there, or it's a 4th gear corner ordinarily, all the way back down into second for that 80 spot. As soon as you hit the 80 you can accelerate all the way up back up to 4th, and then jump back down into second around about 100 for the final difficult corner, and then you can power through the rest of the apex and around the final bend for the checkered flag. So that lap was a 1:11.7, and that meant Paolo won that round with a 1:11.3. So on to the next round, it's Japan, Suzuka, and straight away in this competition there's a cut. So not a very good cut from me. You'll see a better cut at the end of this lap. But Suzuka, it's a nice fast flowing track, and so here we go. This is the first corner. It's the 4th gear bend, around about 130. Keep it in third, nicely on the power, with a little drop in speed there to get through that corner, and then rise through the gearbox again, drop down into third for that one, around the 120s. Back on the power as soon as you get up to the fifth, you drop it back down again, back into third, around about 90, certainly overcooked and mistimed that bend, lost a few milliseconds, and then all the way back up the gearbox again, coming through to the next corner, it's a fourth, 140, lost some speed again through there, around about 102 for that second part of that section, somewhere around the 100 miles an hour mark. And then for the tight hairpin, I usually like to do this obviously in first gear at around 65, and you can see I'm going some way towards that. You can go slightly faster, probably 67, maybe even 69 with Q tyres on, but 65 gets you around that corner. And then what I like to do for this one is to let the engine idle down to fifth, cruise around that one. By the time it's idled down to this point, it's around 115, 120, and you can certainly try and get the 120 around this corner in fourth. I didn't, I only made it in third, so that's another 4/10 of a second lost. And then it's a full speed, whip it around this corner without slowing down, and then the final cut, lean it all the way over to the right, pull right, leave it pulled right, and you should find yourself back on the track in sixth gear and over the line. So that was 126.4, but Paolo won that round with a 123.6, having gained a couple of seconds by doing better cuts than I. So onto the final track, it's Australia. That's the breaking point, anywhere between that white line and the first blue marker on the curb, and you won't see that on the return visit, so that's why I'm marking that down now. You can do this tight chicane in third pretty easily, or fourth, you can get away with that, but on this run I'm doing this in sixth, and that gains at least 2 seconds on the lap. Into third gear for this one, and let it just drop down into second so that you don't get stuck on that corner. Up into third and back down into second for an 80 for this one. Important to hit that 80. Up to third, back down to second for another 80, or maybe even 85 for that one. All the way up there, up into fifth, and then back down to second again for this, which can be done at 90 or higher, but I only made it at 85, so that's not great. And then we get a long run of the fast section, sixth gear there, no point slowing down. And then the big decision on this course is the hairpin. The breaking point is halfway along, there it is, between the arrow and the 100. 45 will get around that corner pretty easy, so as soon as I hit that 45, back on the power. You can go around there a little bit quicker, but you run the risk of going off. And this is a nice easy 85, very slow there, reaching that 85, certainly much slower than usual on that section. And then we reach the same breaking point, here it is, and it's back down to first gear for the 55 to 60 miles per hour final bend. You can, if you're into that slower, you can exit quicker, but it's generally around 60, around that thing, and then it's a cruise over the line to complete the lap. And in that particular case, I managed to get a 109.9, and John 4P won that round with a 108.9. So here are the final scores. So, thanks for watching my play guide and review all the magazines gave Formula 1 Grand Prix at least 90%, some 93% out of 100. I find the playability really excels with a decent CPU, and the game really comes alive on modern machines. If you'd like to join in with our save states and our challenges, the competition is still running. It's now open season, so anybody can join and post their scores on the Lemon Amiga website. So I hope to see you there. Thanks for watching.